So this morning we talked about bringing the mind into the positive instead of thoughts of sensual desire and ill will and harming, thinking, turning our thoughts, even though we want to be present with the feelings that arise when things are threatening or we have responsibilities we have to take care of, maybe with giving someone negative feedback or feedback that's hard to take in, or something like that, or conflict. But then to work with thoughts that are harsh or negative and bringing them into a frame of kindness and gentleness and letting go. And proceeding from there to take action with wisdom and compassion. And so we're practicing today to really notice what we're thinking, and notice whether it fits into the, you might say, the negative or the positive category, whether it's on the side of being fault finding and negative, or if it's on the side of seeing things more broadly, we might say, with more compassion and understanding, but always with clarity about what's happening. And so one of the things that Ajahn Chah talked about with regard to his monastic community, he said that he really discouraged the monastics from sitting around and talking casually. He said it was the most detrimental thing for a monastery, for a monastic community. And on the face of it, that feels pretty harsh or austere or something, strict and confining, because many of us really enjoy our opportunities to visit with each other, to share our experience and talk. But he said, it starts out talking about lofty things, but then it degenerates into negativity and fault finding. And that can be really damaging to a community. You start to, separate into factions, or you start to really have, some negative feelings towards others that you might not have generated or developed otherwise. And so we can look at how this works inside our own mind. And Ajahn Brahm talks about this in The Art of Disappearing, that, when we're thinking a lot of times it has the same effect. You're thinking about something in a positive way, but then as you think more about it, it gets more negative, or maybe things that have happened, things from the past. We go over things from the past. I sometimes think it feels like a sore in your mouth. You just want to rub over it with your tongue all the time. It's like sometimes the experiences we've had can be like that. And we continue to really go over them in our mind and become more negative as we do. And so we hear a lot from the great teachers about stopping thinking and using something like a mantra, like Bhutto, or any other phrase or words that are inspiring or calming, to stop thinking. Stop thinking about the past, stop thinking about the future, that there's really not much, if anything, to be gained about going over the experiences of the past, but that it's really more helpful to the mind, more nourishing to the mind, more supportive to the mind, to be silent inside. So there's that's not easy. I find for myself, my mind loves to think, and it wants to think usually about work. It wants to think about what do I need to prepare for next, what needs to be done, and what problem is there to solve. I guess that's why I wound up in software design and engineering, saying one problem after another to solve, and yet the mind gets tired. The Buddha said in the sutta we looked at this morning that even when you're thinking about good things, the mind gets tired. And what we want to do is give the mind rest, so that we give the mind rest so that it can really go deeper. So this opportunity we have today is to be present with what we think and really notice what happens in the mind as we think, and then see if we can move the needle, you might say, if it's on a gauge, move it from the negative to the positive, and see what that does to the whole felt sense in the mind. And what I often do in these cases is, when I'm thinking something that has some criticism involved in it, judgment, then I like, how do I rephrase this from a place of loving kindness? How do I rephrase this with gentleness? Whether it's about myself or it's about someone else or some situation. And it's amazing how it changes things, how there can be a broader perspective on whatever it is that's happening. Because most of the time, most of us are trying to do something good. And usually when we're doing something that's actually disruptive or harmful, it comes from some kind of conditioning or wrong view. And so we want to take care of those feelings. We want to take care of each other and see if there's a way to work with what's really at hand from a place of moving that needle from the negative into the positive and into it's realistic. It's not like making everything rose colored, because that's not how life is. And if there's anything that we want to do as Buddhist practitioners, it's to see the way things actually are and not hide away from that, not shy away from that. But we can come to it with very different attitudes. And if that attitude, or as we, try to, define or identify what that second factor is in the Noble Eightfold Path, right thought or right intention. If we come to what's happening in our own mind or what's happening in our environment with that right intention, that leads us onwards to Nibbana. As the Buddha said in the sutta we read this morning, that was Majjhima Nikaya number 19. And even if you're very familiar with it, you might look at it again, because there are some profound, simple statements that are easy to kind of quickly brush over, that this is what leads to Nibbana and not the other way. So even though that's an extremely short message, it's enough probably to continue to meditate. And everybody is welcome to sit or We've got plenty of space here to do walking meditation outside as you wish. And for those of you who are here calling in from home, you have the same opportunity. And so as you sit or do walking meditation, just really noticing when the thoughts come, into the mind, and allowing that, to be an opportunity to check where they come from. And, the way the Buddha looked at it in the sutta, when he described that experience, and just to remind us, that experience was from before his awakening. So he's really recommending to all of us who haven't yet realized Nibbana to pick this up, to really see what's happening with our thoughts, and not just where they came from, but where they're going. Are they leading in the right way? So that's our task. And I'm just going to put the Zoom on mute and give everybody a chance to just continue to practice. And then later at 3:00, we'll come together, and I'm going to leave the Zoom room on, and we'll be coming in and out. And there are 8 people in here besides me, all sitting right now, and you can online, you can kind of sit with us. And so I wish you a good couple of hours of practice. Really use it to your best advantage. And welcome to those who weren't here earlier. I see Carol just came in. And I want you to just know that we're about to just start meditating more, or continue meditating, and evaluating our thoughts in a very loving way, to see what's positive, what's negative, and how we transform them. And we have to be careful around that, as I've said a bit before. It's not about shoving things under the rug or making it all into some fantasy. It's about seeing the way things are and knowing that how we hold them makes all the difference to, how our life goes and how we meditate. Everything that we think about through the day when we're not meditating has an impact on our meditation when we sit down to meditate. So I'm gonna stop right there. Enjoy your practice. And 3:00 we'll have questions and discussion. So I don't know about everyone else, but I enjoyed that period of meditation. And things have gotten pretty quiet here, except for the Air Force maneuvers or something that's going on, and a few other little things. But it's been nice afternoon. So I wondered if there are any questions or things you'd like to share about practicing with our thoughts.
I have something.
Yes,
I
Grace.
can share. Thanks. Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of restlessness lately with my meditations in general, kind of. And something a teacher had told me is to start each meditation asking how I'm feeling. But so like just for, a short time to tend to any latent emotions. But then I notice just so much wanting to keep with even like the borderline story, and there's sort of like doubt around, yeah, just a lot of proliferation with that. And sometimes it feels like, then coming back, it's like, okay, well, that was actually wholesome thinking, but it was still proliferation, and it's like not to be tended to right now, sort of thing. And just like wondering any advice of how to be more firm about like not now kind of thing, or like what
Mhm.
needs tending to release emotion versus like cutting it off. And I don't know, there's confusion around that, I think.
Yeah, so if I heard, let me kind of repeat back what I heard because I want to make sure I understand. So what I heard is that, this advice to, when you sit down, first start by just asking yourself how you're feeling. And then without going into too much detail, then, just noticing that at the beginning and kind of settling there. Is that what I heard? And then noticing doubt that comes up and thinking about, I couldn't quite tell what you said you were thinking about, but it was wholesome, but still it's proliferation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then, what's the effective course of action with that?
Mhm.
Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is that when we ask ourselves about how we feel, to really, we notice the emotional state, but then look at where that manifests in the body instead of following the story. So it's very helpful to be present with a feeling, especially if there's something kind of prominent. If everything's kind of okay, but maybe there's kind of a sadness in the background or a negativity, sort of, noticing that and being with that. If there is something in particular that's causing strong feelings, then of course there may need to be some investigation into that. But you can start with just feeling where you feel it in the body, and that cuts off the mental proliferation. So it's not like there's just one pat answer, because like what you were saying is, well, the thought process was wholesome, but it sounds kind of filled with, it's, as you said, with doubt, and so some confusion in there. And I think the proliferation really isn't so wholesome. It's taking the mind space, it's unsettled, it's not helping you go into peaceful meditation. And so thinking, okay, I'm going to just feel it in the body and let myself settle there through that, is probably the most helpful. And then if there is, some question, then doubt is best dealt with by finding someone who can really answer that question, whatever the question is. If it's some question you can't answer, like what should I be doing with my life, then even talking with someone who can help and identify some step that you want to take. But coming to some kind of at least next step, so that the mind just isn't proliferating. So what do you think of that answer?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Thanks. It's easy to forget to stay in the body with it and to jump to like, oh, it's sadness, and then the sort of jumping
Mhm.
off from there. And then even noticing thoughts of Dhamma, like that's what the proliferation around sort of Dhamma rehearsing or something like that.
Mhm.
Then it's like that, oh, well, this is wholesome, so it's okay. But like, no, it's still restlessness in the mind.
Uh-huh.
So that really helps. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things Ajahn Gana said over and over is, don't follow your thoughts and your feelings. And, it's like, wow, well, that would cut down a lot of mental activity, just don't follow the thoughts and feelings, don't take them so seriously, as truth. Our thoughts and our feelings come from conditioning. So even, being, having a reaction to something is because of something that happened in the past. So it's like, yeah, like the Buddha said it also, don't take these things so seriously. It's just a feeling, it's just a thought. So what do we do instead? We calm the mind. I think that sentence in the sutta we looked at is important, that even if the thoughts are wholesome, if I'm thinking too much, I'm far away from immersion. So it's like, okay, what is it? What are the conditions? If no one had anything to say, my question, and it still stands. I can still ask it. My question is, what are the conditions that help the mind settle and come close to immersion, and come closer to what's peaceful and kind and compassionate? So those are just some things to consider. Yeah.
I'll have to leave now, but
Okay.
thanks for today.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Glad you could join us. Take care, Wong. Any other questions or comments? You want to answer my question? What are the conditions?
I think along with what you just said, to me, it's not valuing thoughts and feelings, like just really having that resolve to not value any contents of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just this past retreat, this short retreat we were on, one of the things I noticed is my mind, as I said earlier, really likes to think of what it needs to do next. What do I need to prepare for next? Or what do I need? And of course, a lot of that's teaching. And I can't think of too many things more wholesome than, okay, these are the things I want to bring in for this next retreat I'm teaching or whatever. But what I noticed is there's a rehearsal that goes on, which is not necessarily bad, because I think I actually am able to present my thoughts better if I do have some of that. But I thought, this is almost like fantasy. When people talk about having fantasy in meditation, it's like, I've always thought, well, I don't have fantasy, I don't have the kind of fantasies that I hear people talk about. But that thinking of what I can share with people can almost get into that vein. If I don't watch it, it can be like really rehearsing. And it's not that I actually turn out saying exactly those things. It's not like I'm trying to memorize a talk. I used to go to a place where there were 2 sessions with the same talk given, and the teacher would give that talk and it was almost exact the second time. So there was a rehearsal going on there for sure. And I don't do that. And so I have to ask myself, like, how much of this is actually beneficial? And then at what point is it a fantasy or a proliferation or something, I don't know, unhelpful, wearing out the body and, making the mind tired.
So does it help when you think about that, why am I doing this? And then does the mind calms down and comes to settle.
I don't know if you could hear Nita, but the question was, does it help when you think about, why am I doing this? Does it help the mind to calm down? I think like maybe not immediately, but I think it's putting in the contemplation. And then I feel like the mind is more likely to catch it again later. And the more that it does that and it sees, it's like I think you asked the same kind of question earlier about, or somebody did, about the text. Like the Buddha said, oh, when I thought about it, being, harmful, then it just went away. It's like, really? Like, how did that happen? And I think it happens through practice. So, we try to identify where it's going in the wrong direction, and then it may not change it right away. But if we keep doing that, then eventually it gets quicker. It's like with what Ling was sharing earlier too, about having some very emotionally charged experience and then working with it, and it can take a couple of days, like she said, for that to calm down. But then the next time it happens, if it's the same kind of thing, then you've got more, there's more confidence, and there's like you're starting to develop a pathway, maybe even a pathway in the brain. And we'll talk to the what did you study? Neuroscience?
Oh, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Like you make pathways in the brain for these things, right? It's like probably. And so, I think that you start to get a method of sorts that works faster as you practice it more. So this is my theory. So I don't know, has anybody had this experience? Do you think it's correct? I kind of feel like I have. I've seen it get easier to drop it, or to either that, or you could try like dog training. Leave it. Sometimes the mind responds to those things. Serena?
I remember once on a very early retreat, Ajahn Sumedho, he talked about ruts in the brain, and that we need to do something about that in a wholesome way. So I think, especially now that I've discovered this neurological re-regulation for the CPTSD, that fits so well with my meditation practice, because it consists of a little bit of writing and then the meditation. And for some reason, that little bit of writing in a particular formula that is some kind of neurological re-regulation thing has made a huge difference for meditation practice for me. It's almost as if in the last 6 months, I'm coming newly to meditation after practicing mindfulness meditation since 1994, but never really, yes, mindfulness goes a long way to improve your life, but it isn't samadhi. And I've come to feel that those ruts in the brain that were made in childhood, that Ajahn Sumedho talked about, doing something in practice to make wholesome pathways, that's what makes a huge difference. So for me, it's a real experience. Yes.
Yeah, and the process you're talking about sounds, on the face of it, as you've explained it to me, kind of simple. Like you're writing things down, and then it releases in some sense, or it regulates your emotional state.
Exactly. I guess it's been scientifically designed in neurological research as near as I can gather from what I'm learning. This formula has been devised and it's all about fear.
Mm. Yeah.
The formula is, and I never write for more than about 5 minutes. I mean, the teacher says on a good day, maybe you'll write a page. On a bad day, maybe you'll write 10 pages. You know, generally, after 5 minutes of this formula, I have fear, and then it's a free form. There's no right, wrong, doesn't have to be true, nothing. It's just like, I consider it dumping the garbage. Then, I mean, it really is like a brain dump of all this stuff. And then it ends with something, you know, so that I can release this, so that I can have the energy and focus and mental clarity. Because that's what my experience is, that until I had this, I never really could truly settle mentally to experience samadhi. So it's a whole new world of meditation for me now. Yeah.
Is there something people can search on, or something that you could put in the chat if people want to look at this system or this method?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat. You can just go to YouTube, which was where I discovered it, which in exactly the same way I found you, I had just coming to a point in life where I knew I needed something. Like when I knew I needed a female monastic teacher, and I just somehow went to YouTube and there was your name. And I went to Ajahn Pasano and said, do you know her? Is this the Thai forest tradition? And he said, absolutely, go for it. And the same thing when I came to a point of, I need something else. I tried to find a therapist, but I've had a lot of trauma therapy for PTSD. But what the research now shows is that PTSD doesn't see PTSD complex, doesn't respond in the same way to therapies that the CPTSD does. And yes, the point is, it's very simple, and it leads right into the meditation I've been taught. So just go to YouTube and put in the crappy childhood fairy.
Yeah,
It's all there.
Crappy childhood fairy. And this is CPTSD, so complex.
A medical diagnosis would be C for complex PTSD. But this woman, the fairy, is Anna Runkle, and she's dealt with this for probably 35 years. So she is up on all the latest research, and there is now more and more. But she calls it childhood PTSD because she says that's where it came from.
Yeah, okay.
So they're old ruts in the brain, and they need daily, it's called a daily practice for a reason. It never goes away. It's like meditation. You don't just do it for a while and
Yeah.
it's a daily practice. That's why it fits so well with meditation practice for me.
Yeah. And it is really, I mean, as monastics, as teachers, we run into this with people so often. You know, people who are like, I had a pretty happy childhood. My parents were great, but they're reacting in ways that, you know, disclose this childhood trauma. And it really does need the support of other techniques besides meditation. You know, and mindfulness, as you said, goes a long way. If we really sharpen our mindfulness, that's what catches those thoughts and those, you know, those feelings.
And it is interesting to me, Ayya, that it is so simple. The only change to my meditation practice is about 5 minutes before I begin. So it's very simple, and the bulk of my practice is still meditation, but it's so much deeper and more effective and showing up more in my daily life and in the insights that I can now
Mhm.
get, things I've never seen before, because neurologically I simply was impaired. That's all there is to it. Anna actually calls it a brain injury from childhood.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Serena. Joyce?
Wow, what a great topic. I wanted to mention too that the very next sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya is number 20, which is called the removal of distracting thoughts.
Yep,
It's,
it sure is.
yeah, well, anyway, there's
Yeah.
5 steps, but they're in ascending order, which I think is really important. It's not necessarily mentioned within the sutta, but you don't want to start with the last one, which is she has
No.
kind of a violent connotation. And it would only be when you're at the end of not your rope.
No.
And when none of the 4 previous to it worked, then you would turn to the number 5.
Yeah, we'll look at this one too. I always think of these two as a pair.
Oh, me too, me too.
You know, it really is a beautiful follow-on to identifying the thoughts and being sensitive and aware of the thoughts. And then what do you do with these? They're called distracting thoughts, but what do you do with these thoughts? You know, and it's great. And the Buddha's lists have a reason for their ordering, and it's good to look at that. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you read those 5 that they do have there is a method or a sense to the ordering of them. It's a great sutta.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, that has been actually the greatest impediment to my being able to progress in meditation was all this distracted thinking that would go on. I just could not quiet my mind. And I'm thinking it's because I am I'm an introvert for one thing, but I always was so shy. I really could not speak. And I had a really hard time speaking for the first time. And so I started to look into this distracted thinking because I think that was a compensation somehow, where I'd be describing my life to myself and all those kinds of things going on. But I have to say, even though I can't really say how it happened, I don't really have these distracted thoughts so much anymore. And I practice in my life a lot, like when I'm walking to and fro in my life, going to the YMCA or whatever, I'm always trying to be mindful, just really being in the present moment and trying to notice when thoughts are coming up and do they apply to the present moment, and just keep bringing myself back. And it was really, really, really hard at first. And I would get frustrated, all those kind of negative things. But over time, I mean, this happens to me a lot when I made progress on the path. I can't explain to anybody how it happened. I don't know really what it is, but something about, I don't know. Maybe it's my dedication. I don't know, but
I know the phenomenon you're talking about. It's like something changes and you don't even really realize when it changed.
right.
You all of a suddenly you realize, wow, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not having that pattern anymore. Or there's something and sometimes it can have something to do with an external influence. Like when Ayya Chitananda had her leg issue, and she's like for a year having trouble with this leg, and then they find a hole in her bone and they do surgery and her leg still doesn't get better. And she's like, she can't bow and she can't kneel, and she's in her mid-30s, and she's like, well, I guess it's like this now. And And then she has a session with Sarana, Andrea's woo-woo doctor, and she doesn't really, Ayachitananda doesn't really expect anything to come out of that. And then, a week later, she just bows at the shrine, and she's like, oh, what happened? Oh, the woo doctor. That must have been what happened, Anyway, sometimes without an external influence, we have a similar kind of thing. We do that practice we're talking about, and we keep doing it. We keep noticing our thoughts. We keep turning them. It takes 2 days the first time. It takes a day and a half the next time, whatever. And we keep working on it, but it feels like, yeah, this is my pattern. I'm stuck with this, and then you go for a while and it doesn't happen, and you don't really quite know when it went away. I know that feeling, but it is your persistence.
Mhm.
This is why we have to have the patient endurance. This is why the Buddha said it's such a profound quality, that we keep at it, and we see the results eventually.
Can I say one more thing about Majjhima Nikaya number 20? I always and still do have a great deal of difficulty with the similes. They don't always make sense to me. And I've done a lot of work now, and suddenly I'm starting to be able to understand them, for which I am truly grateful.
Mm.
But if somebody does go to that as a resource, it may not necessarily pop out to you like what it is you're supposed to be doing. And
Yeah, it can take some reflection on what the simile is pointing at, and then maybe even coming up with our own version of the simile that fits our context more clearly. How did you feel about today's similes in the sutta from today? We've got the part about the tending the cows, and then we've got the part about the marsh and the deer. And
well, I have to say, early on, I learned about those two suttas, and I read them over and over and over. I couldn't, what is he telling us? I mean, there were aspects of it that were easy, but the ones you just mentioned, they were not. Now they're very clear. I can really see connection. And I couldn't do it as a beginner. I tried and tried, I really did, and just didn't make any sense to me. I don't know if you would be okay with this, but there is a book that came out kind of recently.
Yeah, you've mentioned this a few times before. Shyla Catherine's book.
I cannot recommend this book more highly. And
Yeah.
I know she is not a monastic, but she has the practice of a monastic for sure. And I'm going to hold it up, even though it's got all my little stickies sticking out and my bookmarks. But this is
Yeah,
the book,
Shyla's a good teacher.
and she's extremely clear. And
Mm.
she has these little boxes with ways in which to practice what it is that is
Nice.
being described, and it's called Beyond Distraction, 5 Ways to Focus the Mind. And she discusses both Majjhima Nikaya 19 and 20. It's
Yeah.
very, very powerful. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to practice speaking in public. I appreciate it very much.
Sure,
It's
Joyce.
so hard for me.
I don't know. You've been around this group for a while and you've been speaking just fine. I don't know. It may not feel like that inside, but
You are probably not aware of the angst I have felt.
no, I'm
Trying
sure
to
I'm not.
raise my hand, whether it's the yellow hand or my own hand. It was a struggle. And I've just been fortunate. This is a safe place. I finally started to recognize that. And I started to push myself more. So I'm really grateful. So it's not easy.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. Thank you. Anyone else have any?
Actually, I want to say that Joyce has very lot of clarity in what she speaks. So whenever
Yeah.
she raises her, and I'm quite happy that something good is gonna come out. now.
Yeah, did you hear that, Joyce? Did you hear her?
I couldn't hear the very beginning.
Nita said that you're very clear when you talk, and she says when your hand goes up, she's quite happy to anticipate something good coming out. And so, yeah, this is the experience on the other side. You know, this is a very good lesson because oftentimes the experience we're having internally, it doesn't match the reality of what other people are experiencing at all. And you know that old saying of beware of comparing your insides with other people's outsides. That's the opposite way. When you're seeing someone, they seem really well put together, and then you're a squiggly mess inside, and you think that, you know, it's so different. But we don't know what's going on in someone else, and we also can trust that we may be able to show up differently than we feel inside, which is what I'm hearing.
Well, thank you, Neat. I really appreciate your comment. And I have to admit, the times when early on when I would try to speak, what I spoke really matched my insides. It took practice. Really,
I don't remember that.
I'm glad you forgot. I'm glad you forgot.
That's gone. I don't remember any of that. Truly, I don't know that you ever were. You know, nah. So, yeah, that's the other thing. I remember all these things from the past, I think, quite accurately, but of course it's not. And nobody else cares. It doesn't stick for them, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm glad you're comfortable, and I'm glad that you're practicing, and I'm glad you're finding a way forward. Paula?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that when I meditate, a lot of times, first I just try to calm things down, but then I find my mind just is attracted to whatever candy thought it sees. And it's always much more interesting than trying to not think. So then sometimes I'll try to analyze, well, what were you thinking about? You know, like what was the thought? Was it a hindrance? And today, was it wholesome or unwholesome? Can I make it wholesome if it was unwholesome? And I get kind of wound up in that analyzing, and it doesn't typically pan out to anything very functional. And I can't, you know, occasionally I'll say, oh, that was a greed thought. I'll look at you, or there's doubt, but most of the time it's just like papancha. It's nothing, like you said, you know, it's planning, it's reviewing what happened, or thinking about what will happen. And I think about, okay, well, that's the future, that's the past, let's be in the present. But I don't find that analyzing stuff all that helpful.
Right. It sounds like it's really feeding into the same unproductive pattern you're used to, which you don't want. So the best thing maybe is to go to feeling in your body. And one of the things I notice about these two different categories of thought is that the really very different mental feeling that I have with them. You know, when there's the desire, the sensual desire, when there's the negativity about whatever is going on, whether it's about myself or it's about other people or whatever situation or whatever is happening in the world or whatever, there's a certain feeling, and it's a mental feeling. You know, whether it's anxiety or it's agitation or it's just kind of a darkness or whatever it is, it's very, very different from the feeling of letting go, kindness, compassion, you know, like there's a spaciousness in that is so different. And since your mind wants to proliferate or wants to think, you know, it wants to have all that thought kind of speech, internal speech going on, maybe going to the feeling tone. And, you know, when you say feeling tone, that's a technical, you know, painful, pleasant, or neutral. But I don't mean that. I mean the emotional state, kind of like what is it that this train of thought, this stuff brings up in me? And then how do I look at it differently? Not the details, not the proliferation of the content, but how do I look at the package of it, the mood of it differently? How do I feel it? Maybe feel it in my body. And then see what are the elements that I can bring in that lift the mind up, that take it away from that kind of spinning. You kind of get the sense of what it's like when the mind spins over something and it just goes nowhere. But you know, that's what proliferation really is. It just kind of keeps spinning over the same thing. It doesn't really have any you know, value. Like you said, you notice that it's unproductive and tiring and draining, you know. So I've been listening to, like I said before, I've been listening to Ajahn Suchart a bit lately, and he talks about, you know, as soon as you find yourself talking to yourself, stop and use a mantra. So, you know, that's one of the things we could ask is that, you know, do we want to try to just turn the mind to something repetitive and comforting? You know, that might not be Buddho, because not everybody's been, you know, conditioned in an environment where that's a meaningful, you know, like inspirationally packed word, but maybe there is something else that has that effect. So some way of putting a kind of a pause in there and putting, you know, like bringing the mind to a different angle and having that repetition. So when I do walking meditation, I do use Buddho. Excuse me. I do use Buddho, and it took a while to warm up to it and to start to feel the benefits of it. And now it's automatic. I stand at the end of my walking path and I'm immediately using Buddho. And Ajahn Tilo helped me with that because he said that he'll do Buddho. I've told you this 100 times already, sorry. But he does Buddho to the tune of Amazing Grace. And that, you know, because it happens to be a tune that is uplifting for me, regardless of whether you like the words or not to the original song, you know, some way, find some way for the mind to be interested in something that brings it peace. And that's not going to be something complicated. It's probably going to be something simple.
I do return to my breath, actually. And sometimes I feel like, well, that's all I can really do during meditation is go from these thoughts that are going swirling around and then returning to my breath. And it seems like at the beginning of the meditation period, I'm out of control. And then towards the end, it takes me, I think, longer. Well, I can't compare myself to anyone else, but I know it takes me a long time But it seems like towards the end, I'm having more settling with the breath. And I have a method with the breath that does work with me, with the in-breath and the out-breath, how I calm myself with those breaths. But when you said that so that's good to know that's good, but it seems like sometimes I feel like that's not enough to do during meditation, but that's about all I can do a lot of times. And that's, there's so many different techniques from Satipatthana to Anapanasati, and then, but I can't go to a lot of those ever. I just pretty much stick with the breath. And but the question I did before you say anything about that is that business of going to the feeling. You said it's not necessarily the physical feeling, it's a mental feeling that you're looking to see what you have, which I hadn't really thought of that. When like the feeling in the body, I don't often, sometimes I can feel body sensations related to my emotions, but I really have to try to do that. That's not that easy, but I could identify mental feelings and emotions easier. So is that what you're saying to do?
Yes. I mean, look at the mental feeling, and if I remember correctly, and I know it's true for me, but it might be true for you also, it took time to get to this place where observing the breath was calming.
Oh yeah.
And so we know that it takes practice to do these things. So yeah, start with the mental feeling, because what we're looking for, like when we feel angry or when we feel sad, or when whatever the feeling is, some feeling of jealousy or some feeling of lust or whatever, when I say, notice where it shows up in the body, it's like, we're aware that we're just flush with emotion, and then maybe see what your body's doing, like, is it tight somewhere? Is it hot somewhere? Like you get angry and your palms sweat or something, like what is it that happens in the body when you feel fear? And every organism, I think, has these reactions. Something happens in the body. So, you don't have to put pressure on yourself to do it, but if you notice the emotional feeling, then, at some point, see what that gains you to be present with the feeling, the emotional feeling, rather than the words. And then see what the next step maybe is, noticing where you see a change in your body.
Yeah, maybe I go to the body first, trying to find something. I can't find it, but the way you're suggesting sounds like it might work a little better.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you just follow up with, when you said you're doing walking meditation and you're using Buddha, can you say what you're doing?
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody describe walking meditation in that way.
Oh, this is really common. So while doing walking, sorry.
That's okay.
While doing walking meditation, you just boo, toe, boo, toe, boo, toe, boo, toe.
Boo with one walk, toe with the next.
Yeah, like when your steps.
Yeah.
Toe.
I do that with my breath sometimes.
Yeah, I do it with, so it keeps the mind from going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then if you need to do boo toe, boo toe, boo toe, boo toe, then do that.
I can sing it.
And maybe, because it depends on how wacko the mind is that day, right? And one thing, and one thing that you can look at is, are there times of day when the mind is more settled or more wild?
Uh-huh.
And my mind is more wild in the morning. Some people, you get up and roll out of bed and you meditate, and it's because the mind hasn't woken up yet. My mind wakes up like in the nanosecond I'm awake. It wants to run all over the place. It wants to run all over the place after whatever I got to get done. I don't know, how that conditioning got laid in there, but who cares? It's like, okay, but in the middle afternoon, after I get over the slumpiness of after the meal, then my mind really wants to meditate. That's a really productive meditation time from like 3 o'clock on through the evening, maybe into the night. But early in the morning, it's just like crazy. And I still can do things with it. I might have to do walking meditation. I can settle it better with metta meditation than I can with breath meditation. I mean, these are the things to learn about ourselves. We're all different. And it's okay that, I've got the wild horse at 6 in the morning or whatever it is, it's like, it's okay. I just need to know how to handle it. And, it's like, so Bhutto, I just almost all the time when I do walking meditation, I'm reciting Bhutto. And Bhutto in the Thai forest tradition is recommended for whenever you're doing anything. When you're washing the dishes, when you're doing any, brushing your teeth, when you're doing anything where you don't have to think about what you're doing.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that hasn't been something that's been so obvious just because you haven't, the Thai forest masters are like constantly all over it, but.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it, not from them, but from people who have learned from them in terms of sitting, but not in terms of walking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's
Interesting.
That's helpful.
Because I don't use it much during sitting practice. It's anyway. It's great to have these techniques and see how they help or apply to each of us in our own experience. And then things change too sometimes. I mean, look at all the changes you've been through in the time you've been alive in this body. From the time you were a little kid, some things might seem consistent, some demeanor or whatever, but there's a lot of changes. Hormones, there's puberty, and then there's menopause and it's like, try living with a bunch of nuns with menopause. It's like yeah. Anyway, we need to continue to discover those techniques that help. And fortunately, thanks to the Buddha, we know what we're aiming for, the direction we need to go in. And it makes sense. And I just, as I started to get exposed to the Dhamma and I saw how much it really is, so deeply connected to morality, so deeply connected to kindness, like unconditional kindness, metta, these beautiful mental states. I mean, it seems like so obvious that it's the right thing. So obvious. And in every way, when you look at the Buddhist teachings, in every way it matches reality and works. It just brings a sense of awe for the Buddha, for the Dhamma, for the enlightened beings since the Buddha. And it's really like how fortunate we are that we are on the same track. And just one more thought, just when I come back to this sutta, this was the Buddha before he was enlightened. He's having all kinds of thoughts coming up during his meditation, no different from us. And he's figuring out ways to work with it, just like we are. So we're on the right track here. It's great. Marianne?
Well, the talk about the music is interesting to me because recently I decided to take up music again. I decided to learn how to play the bass guitar.
Oh,
And
nice.
I really was trying to resolve, it was a childhood dream of mine to learn to play bass.
I
As
can
it comes
see
to-
it on you.
But I was thinking like I really wanted, at least, you know, for the initial like month and a half, to really make sure I practice every single day. But at the same time, once a week, I usually do 8 precepts. And what, you know, you're not supposed to do music, you know, or, you know, entertainment with one of the 8 precepts. I'm like, well, how do I sort of make this work with practicing bass? And one thing that I experimented with last time was I was taking some chants that I had been doing and kind of like, well, what if like I was trying to do a bass riff to this chant?
Right.
And it's like, and it's kind of like 3 notes that's sort of on a pentatonic scale, you know, and it adds a weird, a depth to the chant
Mm-hmm.
that makes the chant seem a little bit more interesting than it did before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is, you know, like you could be super fundamentalist about saying, no, you shouldn't do any sort of, you know, you shouldn't spice up this at all. But it does, I don't know, I find it sort of helpful to make it seem like a more engaging thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, and 3 tones, that's what we're chanting all the time.
yeah, exactly.
It's up, it's down, it's in the middle, you know, it's like, okay, so there's 3 tones, and that brings more resonance in your body, brings more resonance to the experience. Yeah, why not? Why not? You know, it's again, we have to be willing and able to look at how do we use these tools, this framework, in a way that actually leads to the desired results. And yeah, you know, the process of looking at 311 rules and how to apply them in a way that is inspiring, that's protective, that's got integrity, that is applicable to the modern life. Yeah, I know the problem. and there can be wonderful solutions to that really still honor the original purpose of the precept. So that's where the question is. Am I still in the alignment with what this precept is for?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not engaging in entertainment so that I get distracted from my feelings and I'm not mindful anymore. Or I'm wasting my time with something that's pulling me away from being peaceful and being able to go deep into meditation. Or am I training my mind in a way that makes it more disciplined? And because it's interested. So I just had a conversation with Ajahn Pasano yesterday. And one of the things we talked about is the importance of being interested in what you're doing in your meditation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that if you have an interest in it, then you want to do it. And it's inspiring to you, and you're willing to go deeper, and you're willing to spend a lot of time with it. So, yeah, right on. Anything else? You looking pretty satisfied or something? Well, I want to thank you all for your practice. It's wonderful to witness everyone's growth and development on the path. And it's inspiring to see your persistence and your dedication. And if you have suttas that are baffling, let us know and we'll try to flesh them out. And if there are questions or topics you want to have covered on Saturday mornings, let us know. And yeah, I think we're about finished for the day. Any parting words from anybody?
Just thank you so much, Ayya. So very helpful and practical. I'm so glad I was here. Thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Serena. Yes, Paula?
I guess if we decide to air this, if anybody wants to delete their sharing, let me know.
Yeah, does anybody rather not have their sharing go out to the world? The world. Everybody's happy with that. You know, people, it's amazing. Just to share with you, I got a letter recently from a man who's incarcerated in Florida, and he was just, the letter is so beautiful. He's found the Dhamma. He loves what we're doing. He finds it so incredibly helpful and inspiring. And he went on and on about how right on it is and how much it means to him. And you know, it was inspiring. I think I'm going to save that letter. It's really lovely. And you know, like myself, he wishes he had found the Dhamma earlier. But the fact that he's, you know, listening to all of our YouTube recordings and talking about specifics about them, you know, tells me that what we're doing here is so important to people we may never meet. Yeah, so I appreciate it when you share your experience, and I'm sure a lot of people do too. Okay, thank you all. I'm just going to chant a blessing here at the end. And to you and to everyone and our friends, Misty, Yuka, Alan Sinaki is still struggling, and Dorothy, Charles Rosenthal's mom, who just passed away, and also everyone in Gaza and Israel. And we haven't forgotten Ukraine. So may you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Buddhas, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Dhamma, may you ever be well. May you have every good blessing. May all the devas protect you. By the power of all the Sangha, may you ever be well. Thank you. Bye, everyone.